All right. With that being said, I'd now like to introduce Senator Rob Marwick and Representative Lindsey LaPointe for their presentation. You guys can take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christian. I will start, and this is a great introduction of Christian to many of the people we're lucky to represent. I see some of the participants, and you are folks that deeply care about your community, that are engaged, that wear many hats. And so on behalf of me and the Senator, just thank you for your participation in many community activities all year round, including this very hot day in June. So as you all know, I'm State Representative Lindsey LaPointe. I am about to hit my 5-year mark in the General Assembly, which some days I can't believe it. But here we are, and we're going to move pretty quickly so we can get to everything. But I wanted to start by just doing a little table setting because, and I'm just going to call him Rob because he is my friend. When Rob and I are out and about in the community, we frequently hear from people and they say, "Oh, are you in Springfield all the time?" And the answer is no, but certain times of year we are there a lot. So during the spring, from about the end of January until near the end of May of every year, that is when we are in the thick of the legislative session. And Rob and I are in Springfield 3 days a week. And when we get to the end of May, we're there more like 5 days a week or even all days a week. And the bulk of all of the legislative activity that we do, including the state budget, happens during the spring, and we really wrap up at the end of May. There are always some exceptions to that. We have a short November calendar every year, October or November, and oftentimes we go back in early January. But Rob and I live here in the neighborhood on the far northwest side of Chicago. We are in year 2 of the 103rd General Assembly. And each General Assembly is a 2-year cycle. So all the bills that we're talking about now, if we don't move them forward by early January 2025, then we start over a few weeks later in later January 2025. Wanted to touch on what our purview is as your state legislators. I represent 108,000 people. Rob represents about 210,000 people. And we don't want to make any assumptions that people know this. We introduce bills, we lead bills, we vote on bills related to state law. That is what we have the most control over. And there are big issues out there like healthcare, human services, public safety, taxes and revenue, public education. We make big decisions about funding those things and how we are going to structure our laws related to those things. As you can see here, there is just hundreds and hundreds of bills introduced every year, and a couple hundred of them passed into law. There's no way we can touch on all of them here. So consider this a sampling, and then we can follow up and go deep on things you want to talk about later. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is Rob and I have to know a little bit about many, many things, but we do specialize in certain things. Rob is the chair of the Pension Committee in the Illinois Senate. He's also the chair of the Judiciary Civil Committee in the Illinois Senate. He is a lawyer. That makes sense. I am the chair of the Mental Health and Addiction Committee in the House. I do a lot of human service work. I'm vice chair of that committee. So those are kind of part of what we specialize in addition to knowing certainly a little bit about many, many things. So with that table setting, I will hand it over to my good friend, Rob.
Thanks, Lindsey, and I appreciate the introduction there. Congratulations. I guess it is days away from your 5th anniversary, and so it's been a heck of a great 5 years. I just finished my 12th regular session in the General Assembly, and it's really been a singular honor and privilege to serve. It is one of the most fulfilling things that I've done with my life, especially having that ability every day to go down and make a real difference in people's lives. And it's not the sort of thing that that you do to get a pat on the back, but there is a great satisfaction in the work that we do, knowing that we have the ability to make a difference on some of the problems that our state faces, create opportunities for people, and hopefully, especially given the area that we represent, allowing people to really live out that American dream of owning a home, having a secure life and a secure retirement, being able to provide quality education options for our children so they can also pursue the American dream. And so it's something that's been very important to me, and something that's been a real an honor to do. And needless to say, to me, I always think of America as what's been described as the land of opportunity. And as I always say, that opportunity is not an equal opportunity. That's not guaranteed. But it is an opportunity. And the moment that America loses the fact that everyone has an opportunity to succeed and be successful in whatever they choose, the moment we're no longer America. And the way that we provide that opportunity, by and large, is through our investments in public education, so that every child, no matter what zip code you're born in, has the opportunity to have the education that they need in order to have a fulfilling life, and to be able to participate successfully to the best of their abilities in our society. And so, happy to talk about some of the progress that we've made in education. And there's been so much progress over the year. If you've followed us, we have over the years, in my 12 years, we've done so much, changing the way that we fund education, creating an elected school board for the Chicago Public Schools, and continued investments, increasing funding for education by $350 million per year, every year, for the last 7 years. And so there's been so many good things, and I think that this year's session builds upon that. Senate Bill 1 creates the Department of Early Childhood, and this is important. Throughout the last 20 years, we as a society and as government, as educational professionals, have learned the importance of early childhood programs, building that foundation as early as possible, identifying problems with learning and disabilities so that they can be overcome at an early moment, builds a foundation for that success that cannot be duplicated in later years. So we've learned how important it is to get to children early, and we've done so much to build that out. But that was done sort of piecemeal. And so this creates a department to be the lead agency for administering and providing early childhood education and care programs and services to children and families statewide. It is a coordination of efforts to take what has been so positive for our state and create a more efficient delivery of that. Senate Bill 15, the next item on the list that you see here, is the final step in creating the elected school board. As many of you may or may not know, yesterday was the first day, today was the first day for the submission of petitions for candidates for what will be the first ever elected school board in the history of the Chicago Public Schools. This is an issue near and dear to my heart. I started this about 8.5 years ago, and I carried the legislation that created the elected school board. I actually passed it in the House and then moved to the Senate, picked it up and passed it in the Senate. This created the election procedures and the maps, and we are moving forward with that. The first elections will appear on the ballot in November, and we will have 10 in January. 10 elected members of the board will be sworn in alongside of 10 appointed members and an appointed school board president. And then in 2026, all 20 districts will be elected, including the school board president, and we will have that fully elected school board that Chicago residents have been waiting so long for. A quick note about our budget, because really what we do is from the state level is, in addition to creating those laws, is spending that money where it needs to be spent. So $8.6 billion now evidence-based funding, which again is recognizing the needs of communities are different, making sure that we're getting money in an equitable way so that every child, regardless of their zip code, has access to the tools and resources they need to be successful. $748 million now for early childhood education programs. Again, we talked about building that foundation for success when it matters most. $711 million, a record for MAP funding. This is the monetary assistance program that helps children from middle class, working class, and working poor families have monetary assistance to attend colleges. It's a really successful program, and the fact that we are setting records on it means that more of our qualified high school students have the opportunity to continue their education and pursue their dreams. Finally, $200 million for after school and youth summer programming. This again is completing that educational experience for children in disadvantaged neighborhoods, giving them positive alternatives and allowing them to really reach their educational goals. And so that is a snapshot for education. And now if we'll turn to the next slide, I'll continue on and talk a little bit about some of the financial relief that we provided. Senate Bill 3455, and this is a bill that I passed in the Senate, commissions the Department of Revenue in consultation with the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity to conduct a comprehensive study of the state's property tax system and issue recommendations for improvement. This is a recognition that Illinois property taxes continue to be a problem, and there continues to be a lack of transparency and opaqueness to the process that really gives people a lack of certainty and a lack of belief that there is some fundamental fairness, and I think that is really important to us. So we have commissioned this study. We will take that study and we will use the recommendations in it, in addition to other studies being done on property taxes, to make to put together a package of reforms. And I'll talk more about that later. But this is a step in the direction towards creating real property tax reform for the state of Illinois. SB 2919, another bill that I sponsored, allows foreclosure sales to be conducted online, in person, or both. This is really important. For people that are going through a mortgage foreclosure are dealing with one of the most difficult financial situations imaginable. And what they need out of that foreclosure process, if their property is sold at a foreclosure auction, is to ensure that they get the best price possible for their home. Conducting it online, just like everything else that we sell online, all on auctions are being done online, allowing and putting in place rules that ensure that there are reasonable fees, that people are not getting gouged in this difficult financial time, and that they get the best possible price for their home, so that if there's any excess, they will get the most out of this difficult financial situation. And if there's a shortfall, it will be limited to the smallest amount possible. Senate Bill 2933 prohibits medical debt from being included on a person's credit report. Again, this acknowledges the fact that our health insurance system leaves much to be desired, and people are often left in really critical situations where they're overcharged because they don't have insurance, and they're left with debt that they can never repay. And many times, due to something that wasn't even their fault, they get hit by a car and they're left with these massive medical debt. And so what this does is says, hey, if you don't pay your credit cards, you don't pay your rent on time, you get into debt for other reasons, that's fair game. But medical debt is something that is unique, and it should not reflect upon someone's ability to pay, since most of those bills no one could pay. Finally, child tax credit. This is something that we're happy to have put into the budget, expanding the earned income tax credit for income eligible families with children 12 and under. So it's a $50 million investment. It provides working poor families with additional tax relief, creates a little bit more progressivity in a otherwise regressive tax system we have here in Illinois. And then finally, the elimination of the 1% sales tax on groceries. So this was an initiative of the governor to eliminate that 1% state sales tax, to give families a little bit of relief in this difficult financial times. And with that, I will turn it back to my friend Lindsey for the next slides.
All right, now we're going to dive into some healthcare and human service issues. And I think, as many of us know, access to healthcare, access to affordable healthcare, and removing the barriers of that access is incredibly important. And our health insurance industry has not made it easy. Two things I want to say about health insurance and access to care before I get into these bills. And that is the scope of the health insurance, which includes behavioral health, that we as state lawmakers have, is related to state regulated commercial insurance plans and Medicaid. And Medicaid is our health insurance for low-income people, and it's a joint state federal program. And then we all know what commercial insurance is. And of all the commercial insurance plans out there, about 40% of them are state regulated. So we don't have a full scope. So these bills, if we're talking about commercial insurance, just know that it's about 40% of people in Illinois. It includes most people that work for the public sector. So lots of these might affect you. So this first bill here was one of the governor's signature bills this year. It got rid of, although keep in mind this is all going to be effective in 2026, but it will get rid of prior authorization denials. It'll really crack down on junk insurance plans, which it is what it sounds like. People buy insurance plans, but they're really not strong and barely cover anything. There's mechanisms to stop unchecked rate increases and mechanisms to eliminate ghost networks. And ghost networks might sound like a cool thing. They are not. A ghost network is when you have your insurance information in front of you and it says, look, these are all the doctors and professionals you can access, but in real life, they are not there. They are just ghosts, and that's why they're called ghost networks. So come 2026, this should really increase access to healthcare for folks. And this bill includes getting rid of prior authorization for inpatient mental health care. The next bill here, HB 5239, was led by Representative Kelly Cassidy, and it's another one of our bills on the long pathway to protect access to reproductive health care, including abortion here in Illinois, which we know this is a controversial issue, and we're on the front lines of it due to Roe v. Wade being turned over in 2022. Illinois has done an incredible amount of work to protect access to care. We're considered a beacon of reproductive health care access in the Midwest, and this bill takes it further by bolstering the protections for people seeking access to care who come from other states, by making clear that the state of Illinois won't aid in another state's investigation of people coming into Illinois to get care that is legal here. The law also gives people the right to sue if their information is improperly shared. We are all about protecting access to a full scope of reproductive health care in Illinois, and we're going to continue to introduce bills and pass bills on this subject because we are in a shifting landscape, no doubt. There's a lot of questions about what is going to happen at the federal level. We just saw a ruling on mifepristone, a few days ago. Next here is a bill that requires state-regulated commercial insurance that I just mentioned to cover the diagnosis and treatment of infertility. It requires employers of more than 25 employees to also cover annual menopause health visits for people over 45 years and older without cost sharing. And cost sharing means those copays that we often have to pay when we seek care. And the idea here is to really recognize that healthcare is an expansive thing. And as the technology for IVF moves forward, we are making changes to make sure that families have choices, and families can access technology to have children when works for them. And so we know many people struggle with infertility, and we have said in the Illinois legislature that is a part of healthcare, and health insurance plans should be covering it, just like menopause is for people over a certain age. The next one here, SB 3753, this was my bill that I did in partnership with Senator Laura Fine. It is related to our adults with developmental disabilities in Illinois. And this is a population that the states have much responsibility for. And there are a range of service and housing options for people, not enough. And I love to remind people that the wait list to access services for adults is 15,000 people long. But what this bill does is it made clear what the appropriate population is for our state-operated developmental centers. And those are our care settings that are bigger, that are run by the state, more of an institutional setting than a community-based setting. Over the years, we have shrunk the footprint of those state-operated developmental centers. They are the right fit for some people. So this bill makes clear that people should be assessed every year to make sure they are heading to the right level of residential care. And then this final bill here, colloquially is known as our birth equity bill, HB 5142. It requires insurance providers to cover all, and again, we're talking about the state regulated commercial insurance, outlines that those insurance plans do have to cover all pregnancy, postpartum, and newborn care services, with some of those services not requiring cost sharing. And I am sure that anyone who has gone through, any family that's gone through a pregnancy knows that, like, it's, even with insurance, it is ridiculously expensive. Bills come in, and the point of this bill is to really reduce those barriers to pregnancy and postpartum and get at real birth equity so people aren't going into debt by choosing to have a family. Next slide here. Okay, behavioral health, which behavioral health care is a part of healthcare. Several of these bills I was proud to lead because this is my wheelhouse. This first bill here passed the House with bipartisan support. It did not yet pass the Senate. But what this bill is trying to solve a problem you might have experienced, and that is when people go to use their health insurance to access therapy from a social worker or a counselor, or perhaps drug treatment, or perhaps a psychiatrist, the response that we get is there's a wait list 3 months long, 4 months long, 6 months long. And the reason for that is we do not have enough behavioral health providers that are signing up to work with insurance plans. And so this bill does something pretty transformational. It sets a rate reimbursement floor for behavioral health providers who are joining insurance networks, so they can get paid at the same, with parity as physical healthcare providers. This bill has a lot of potential to vastly grow access to care, and I will be working on it into the fall and perhaps next spring. This next section is about Medicaid. That is our joint state federal health insurance for folks that are low income. And every year we look at Medicaid and we look at what rates we might raise, because overall the Medicaid rates are quite low. They cover about half the cost of care. And so if you're a psychiatrist, you're probably not going to say, yes, I'm going to take Medicaid. Maybe you'll take commercial insurance where your reimbursement is much higher. So we increased the reimbursement for psychiatrists and advanced practice nurses that are certified in mental health, with the goal to increase access to psychiatric care for anyone in Illinois on Medicaid. We also got rid of some prior authorization for psychotropic drugs for adults with serious mental illness. All too often, even though the doctor prescribes a medication that he or she has deemed that you need, you then have to go through another step and get it run through what we call utilization management at the insurance company. And this starts to chip away at that. Next here, we have a budget item related to mental health and wellness services on all of our public university and community college campuses all around the state. And we started funding this in calendar year 2023. The idea is young people in colleges, just like many of all our other neighbors, struggle with mental health, and it can be a tough life transition, and we want to make it as easy as possible for our college students to know where to find mental health and wellness support. Right here on the Northwest side, Wright College has a wellness center that is in part funded with this line item, and we kept it at level funding because in general, this was what we call a maintenance budget year, not a ridiculous amount of new things. So we fought just to keep this level. And then finally here, we passed a suite of bills to grow the behavioral health clinical workforce. The idea with these bills is we want more licensed family therapists, we want more licensed clinical social workers and licensed clinical professional counselors to come into Illinois. We don't want them to be hung up by having to retake a test. So there's a bill to make it easier for military spouses to come into Illinois and get licensed quicker, a bill to welcome in licensed marriage and family therapists. As long as they've worked without incidents in other states, they can come in and not have to take another exam and go through that bureaucracy. And then we are desperate to grow and diversify our mental health workforce. So we did a bill to make sure that our state Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation will grant accommodations for people whose first language isn't English or for people with disabilities, because we desperately need to grow our workforce. We should have done this a long time ago, frankly. So that's a smattering of what we did in behavioral health care this year. With a little more targeted to first responders, I'll touch on some of this and I'll have Rob touch on a bill he was proud to lead and I was proud to vote for. First responder mental health is a serious, serious issue. And it's really important to those of us on the far Northwest side where we are home to lots of dispatchers, police, fire, and EMTs. We have a lot of stigma, especially for first responders when it comes to accessing mental health. So with these bills, the goal was to get rid of barriers, So this first bill here now requires local and state employee health plans to cover couples therapy for law enforcement officers and firefighters and the partners or spouses they reside with. Believe it or not, we needed to pass this law. Many health plans of first responders did not cover partner therapy or couples therapy, as we call it. This next one here eliminates out-of-pocket expenses, so those copays for first responders all across the state seeking mental health treatment with their insurance. And this definition of first responder is a little more expansive, which I think is tremendous. It includes police, fire, emergency medics, and dispatchers. Those 911 operators carry a lot on their shoulders and are first responders too. And then I'll skip down to a budget line item. We are reappropriating $10 million to the city of Chicago for first responder wellness programming. And first responder wellness here is defined police, fire, dispatch. And this is a program that the city is in the early stages of building out. But Rob and I knew this was incredibly important. So we fought to get it in the budget. And then when the money wasn't all spent last year, to keep it in the budget. And I'll hand it over to you, Rob, to talk about your bill.
Thank you. And yeah, Lindsey, some of the work that we've done here has really been inspiring. And I think it's long overdue. Like you said, the idea that the challenges of first responders are limited to just themselves is just so misguided. We have to acknowledge that the burdens that they bear affect their families and allow them to receive that. So that was a great bill. I do want to give one little quick shout out to a fellow Northwest Sider for the eliminating the out-of-pocket expenses. Our good friend Dave Feller is the legislative liaison for Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart, who and he did a lot of work with legislators to get that bill to pass, eliminating that co-pays for mental health treatments, which I think is so important. Senate Bill 2918, which you left for me, thank you, is a bill that I sponsored. And what it does is this is a bill that acknowledges the challenge and the difficulties of the work that police officers do. There is often a lot of claims of disability. There are a lot of injuries related to the job. And what this does is this ensures that police officers, when they apply for and receive disability benefits and they're cleared to return to work, that a job is waiting for them, that they can't be discharged because of long-term disability. And again, I think this is a way of, everyone talks about back the blues, support the police. You have to put your money where your mouth is. It can't just be a pat on the back and an attaboy. It's got to be, we've got to show them that when the chips are down, that we're going to be standing there with them. And I think that this is one of the things that does it. It protects their ability to continue to provide for their families without having a large change of life event simply because they suffered a disability and applied for those benefits. So very happy to see that pass and go to the governor. And I'll hand it back to you. Oh, are we still on public? We're still on public safety. I see. All right. Apologies. This is still my show for the moment. So talking about some of the things that we did related to public safety. So that was first responders, which of course dovetails right into public safety. Let's begin with House Bill 2323. This creates the Uniform Statewide Crime Statistics Task Force. As we know, in this day and age, things have changed. Not only has the nature of crimes and the way that they're being committed changed, but how we police crime and criminal activity has to change along with that. So much more is being done in a organized fashion in terms of crime. And it is important that we change our models to keep up with technology and that we're utilizing that to help us prevent crimes from happening before they happen. And we've got a long way to go to get there, but that is what the creation of the statewide task force is going to do. It assists in the development and implementation of an integrated software system for gathering and publishing crime data from all law enforcement agencies throughout the state. So now, instead of people operating in a vacuum, we've all seen those old movies where somebody calls up and says, hey, do you have any missing people over here that fit this sort of pattern? We're going to have that data available. This allows our policing to come into the 21st century with data and use that to help solve crimes. I think it'll be very beneficial. Moving along to Senate Bill 3713, this broadens the who can be considered a victim or applicant for people who have been affected by crimes, who are victims of crimes, so that they can be eligible for crime victim compensation. Adds more types of payments to better cover the different ways victims might lose things like belongings or money that they would have earned. Again, we have programs in this state that compensate victims of crime to help them get back on their feet. And this broadens that so that more people, and again, adapting our programs to recognize that things are changing. Let's talk about budgetary investments. Very proud of the budgetary investments that we've made over the last few years. Really, again, trying to change the way that we invest in public safety, creating or addressing root causes of violence, attempting to get to those people who might commit crimes and give them credible alternatives so that we can prevent crimes before they happen and not just respond to them. But if we must respond to them, investing in the things, the tools and the resources to help solve those crimes. So $150 million investment to the Reimagined Public Safety Program. This is a smart early intervention program for at-risk youth. It's diversion programs, street outreach, case management, victim services, and gun crimes prevention programs. This is something that is really attempting to get into those neighborhoods where crime is a problem, get to those young people, and again, give them, good alternatives. $60 million towards police resources. Again, this is something that we started at. Camera technology. There's an article in the Chicago Tribune today about it, how effective it's been. The state police absolutely love what we've been able to do with camera technology in terms of being able to track perpetrators of crime and not have to chase them at high speeds down the highways, but track them through cameras and find them and make arrests when it's safe to do so. Additionally, we continue to invest in our crime labs, our data storage in order to give police more resources to help solve crimes that have happened. An additional $10 million to officer recruitment and retention. This is very important. We have a shortage of police officers, and we are continuing to do things to address that shortage, to attract and keep people in that profession. And so $10 million towards that. And finally, $25 million to Access to Justice, a program that provides education, outreach, and legal representation to historically marginalized communities. And with that, I'll turn it back to Lindsey for some highlights on our environment.
All right. And before I talk about the environment, just want to say that I'm very proud to have funded the Reimagined Public Safety Programming, and I have visited with groups of neighbors from the far northwest side, several of the nonprofits that run the programs all across the city, but mostly on the south side and west side where we have pockets of concentrated poverty and high violence. And some of the programming just does an exceptional job of really intervening with our mostly young men who are most at risk of shooting or being shot, and really intervening with evidence-based programming and relationships to change behavior and stop crime. And we were just at an event on the west side today with lots of these amazing workers in that realm. So just wanted to shout that out. The environment. This is so important to so many people all across the state, but in particular right here in our neighborhoods on the far northwest side. We run an environmental advisory council. Some of you are here right now on this call, and we're just very proud to work alongside you. There were some big wins in the environment and hard things. And this first one is absolutely a hard and complicated thing. We passed a bill related to carbon capture and sequestration regulations. And the whole point of carbon capture is to try to decarbonize industry, which is one of our leading polluters, by capturing carbon, by transporting it, and then it sounds wild, sequestering it underground. And this is a bill that took much collaboration amongst the manufacturing field and our leading environmental advocates in Illinois. The environmentalists were at the table every step of the way for this bill. And this bill put really strong guardrails into place for what needs to happen if we're going to move forward with carbon capture and sequestration. Most importantly, there is also a 2-year moratorium, so nothing will happen for 2 years because the federal government is actively engaged in rulemaking. And I do just want to share from the environmental perspective, because this is a controversial issue for many. This does not mean we stop moving forward on all the other ways to move away from fossil fuels. We still have a lot of ways to go with wind power and hydrogen power and solar power. But this is one piece of the puzzle. And the environmental advocacy groups in Illinois were at the table and helping to craft this bill with strong guardrails. Moving down, we've struggled with recycling in Chicago and in Illinois. And this bill here, the Large Event Facilities Act, requires facilities that have a capacity of 3,500 people or more to participate in recycling and composting. So we're talking here about our big events venues that generate so much waste that could be recycled very quickly. So we have changed state laws to move the ball forward and force some recycling at these big facilities. The next one here is actually going to get enacted pretty quickly, in about a year from now, July 2025. So as of July 2025, when you go to a large hotel, let's say August, we'll give until August, in Illinois, you will no longer see small plastic bottles. Those generate a ton of waste. I'm sure you're already seeing that at some hotels, they already have the dispensers in the shower area. And so Representative Cam Buckner led this bill to move away from small plastic bottles in hotels in Illinois. The next one here requires landlords to notify tenants of a property's flooding hazards prior to signing a lease. Flooding is an issue. Unfortunately, it will continue to be an issue in large part due to the impact of climate change. And so this provides a protective measure so a tenant gets to learn about flooding hazards before they move forward and sign the lease, and put some measures in here for relief like rent reimbursement and a pathway to bring action against the landlord if they were not notified. And then finally, we had one or two bills related to native plant landscapes this year. One of them has moved forward so far. I'm sure many of you know what a native plant landscape is. We have some on the far northwest side in people's front yards. This bill in particular prevents homeowners associations from restricting residents' ability to plant those native landscapes within their yards as long as they're not infringing on their neighbors. We are going to see more of this in the future as more people integrate native landscapes and pollinator gardens into their properties. And guess what? That helps mitigate flooding too. So we're always happy to see that in any part of Chicago, but especially our neighborhood.
Okay, back to me for some budget highlights. I think most of these budget highlights people are aware of, but I'm going to run through them really quickly. And of course, the biggest highlight is our first little bullet point there. We've had 5 years of fiscal progress. And again, this 5 years comes on the heels of what was 2.5 years of just a fiscal collapse under the previous administration with Governor Rauner, where we accumulated billions of dollars of new debt. Instead, what we've done over the course of the last 5 years is paid off over $14 billion in current debt. We've made supplemental payments from our pension systems, and we've continued to make every required payment plus additional payments into our pension to pay down some of that debt. And we've balanced budgets year after year. And not surprisingly, after decades of credit downgrades, we have received our 9th credit rating upgrade. And this is so important because so much of the operation of government is based off of bonding. And when you have better credit ratings, you get better interest rates on the bonds that you issue, and you make better use of taxpayer dollars. And so that fiscal responsibility is something I'm very proud to have been a part of. And so it's been a really good year. And so again, we've got our 6th balanced budget in a row. There was, of course, some challenges with this budget because we did not have some of the surpluses like we've had in recent years. So there are some new revenue sources. What we did was We increased some of the fees related to sports betting. So sports betting used to be at a 15% flat tax on that betting industry. It has gone to a graduated structure, 20 to 40% based on the size. And then we also changed the net operating loss cap extension. This is a revenue tool that was based on the way corporations file their income taxes in years where they have losses. They can carry those losses forward. And what it does is it creates a cap on any one year. So they can still carry those losses forward, but there's a maximum cap that they can take in any one given year. So we've extended that. There's a retailer's discount cap. Believe it or not, when you pay sales taxes at a business, we don't collect those directly. We rely on the retailers to collect them, submit them, and report, and they get a discount. They actually keep some of those taxes for doing the work of collecting them. We've put a limit on that to $1,000 per month. There is now permission for some small fireworks in Illinois. Fireworks have long been banned, so some taxes on some of these ground-based sparklers. We've also increased video gaming taxes by 1%, and then re-renters, which is your people who book facilities and then re-rent them out. You're familiar with these. It's the re-renters of properties. So those are some of the new revenue sources. But additionally, as you've heard so much, we have increased so much in the way of investments into human services, homeless services and support, domestic violence and trauma recovery services. Wage increases, so important for professionals who care for our developmentally disabled, senior care services, community through the community care program. So much of investment in that. And then, of course, investments in the environment, electric vehicle rebates, electric vehicle charging infrastructure, lead service pipeline replacement, again, critically important, and lead poisoning screening. This is one of those holdovers from generations before us that really has made a difference in our society, where people are constantly being exposed to something that literally affects your ability to process, affects your ability to brain to work the way it should. And so getting to that task long overdue. And then, of course, flood mitigation assistance. So many good investments. So a balanced budget, really providing, hitting our, I would say, our core priorities: education, public safety, healthcare, but fiscally responsible and doing it in a way that I think is really done right. And so that is our budget highlights for the year. And if we'll move to the next slide, I do want to talk about capital investments. One of the most important things that we have done since Governor Pritzker has taken office is recognize that it's so important for government to invest capital funds into our community. This is infrastructure, maintenance, and repair. This is one of the worst debts that a government can take on, is when we don't have the money, is to say, well, just don't fix our roads, don't fix our bridges, don't invest in public transit. We see that those problems manifesting itself. Every dollar that we defer costs exponentially more to spend later on. And so the fact that we've been able to year after year after year make capital investments and begin to chip away at those items of deferred maintenance or repair has been great. Working in partnership with Lindsey over the course of those last 5 years since she's been in, we have been able to bring a substantial amount of investment to our community, and I think it's been wonderful. So we've got over $19 million of capital investment appropriations into the 10th Senate District and 19th House District, including over $6 million in just core infrastructure, street resurfacing and repair, curbs, gutters, sidewalks, alleys. $2 million in improvements to our local park districts, $6 million in investments into our public schools for infrastructure improvements there, building facilities, grounds improvements, really important stuff. and $1.5 million for local organizations that provide a variety of services, homeless outreach, and we have been able to Senior Assistance Center, the Old Irving Park Association, the area. One of the things that Lindsey and I have been working on is continuing work that was started by one of our predecessors in this area, Representative Jamie Andrade, attempting to tackle that very difficult area around the Irving Park Transit Center. So we're investing money into a local group to help provide really sanitation and cleanliness of that area, which is kind of over infested with pigeons. And so, getting dollars where they're going to make a difference in our community, something we're very proud of. Additionally, we've provided money to invest in our local arts for improvements. Again, trying to recognize that those investments, the entire list that I've given here, improve our communities on a daily basis. And as these monies start to go in, you will start to see these improvements in our communities. Proud to be a part of that. And with that, I think I'm going to go back to Christian now for the next set.
That's right. Yeah, if I can jump in here. Unfortunately, we do have to skip our slides dedicated to the representatives and senators' upcoming priorities as well as issues still in progress, but both of those topics will be addressed later in tonight's town hall. But that being said, thank you very much to Senator Marwick and Representative LaPointe for that presentation. Keep in mind that if you do have questions, you can submit them at any point in the chat room and we'll get to them at the end of the night. And at this time, we'll move on to some questions from myself. So while each question will be answered by both the senator and the representative, we will alternate who answers each question first, beginning with Senator Marwick. And my first question is this: what were your main goals and priorities for this legislative session, and how successful do you feel you were in achieving them?
Well, if I have to self-grade myself, Christian, I would say that the answer is I would give myself an incomplete. And the reason that I say that is that some of the issues that I've been working on, sort of like the elected school board, which took 8 years to bring to fruition, are not something that are going to get done in one session. So I would say that the three biggest things that I worked on throughout session, and I'm going to continue to work on, are three things that I think are very important in Illinois. One is significant pension reform, including fixing the problems that we have with our Tier 2 pension system that was enacted in January 1st of 2011. There are problems that need to be addressed on that. We'll be working on those over the summer with the hope that we will bring legislation in the fall or perhaps in early January to address that problem. And I'm hoping that that will be part of a package of bigger reforms that will help reform the way that we pay back our pension debt while ensuring that our hardworking and valued public sector employees have the retirement security that they have earned and deserve and that we promise to them. The other thing that I'm continuing to work on, and it was mentioned sort of here in one of the bills, is property tax reform. I think that Illinois is long overdue for significant property tax reform. But again, this is not something you want to just dive into. There are too many attempts at property tax reform that have not been serious enough, and as a result, we continue to have the same problem. So we're looking at getting some studies done, collecting some data, doing some real deep analysis, and seeing what can we do on a comprehensive basis that would really bring about sort of an equity and transparency and reliability that that every taxpayer, be it a renter, a property tax owner, a single family home owner, or owner of a business, feels would give them some reliability in the system, that it's working for them. And then finally, I continue to work on something that has been sort of core value to my mission since I started running. When I ran the first time over 12 years ago, I talked much about creating some fairness in our system, and that is middle-class tax relief. I filed a middle-class tax relief bill, which would create a graduated rate structure, ensuring that the wealthiest pay a fair amount, and that we bring some relief to the middle class, which is so overburdened. So that is a much longer game, but it's something that I believe in and I'll continue to push for. So for right now, happy to get some good bills passed now, but the bigger problems that really will affect the state over time, I've got some work to do.
Absolutely. And Representative LaPointe, if I could address the same question to you.
It's a good question, Christian. And my answer is in part captured by the first upcoming priority I have listed here. One of my biggest goals this legislative session was uplifting and supporting the healthcare, behavioral healthcare, and human service workforce. And all of those professionals, some are licensed, some are not licensed, work together to provide support and care to our neighbors, to us, to people all around Illinois. So we're talking about licensed nurses, we are talking about social workers, we are talking about the street outreach workers that are doing work on the south side and the west side of Chicago. And I was focused on supporting this workforce this year and made some progress. As Rob mentioned, we got $1 an hour wage increase for the direct support professionals. They were making $11 an hour not that long ago. And now we're in the ballpark of $19, $20 an hour, depending on where you are in Illinois. And these are for our folks that are working in group homes for adults with developmental disabilities. Incredibly important and validating and rewarding work. And I believe the wages should reflect that. So we got the $1 an hour wage increase for DSPs. We got $1 an hour wage increase for our in-home care workers, for our seniors who we want them to be able to stay in their homes. We did finally fund something I very much believe in. It's kind of nerdy. It's called the Human Service Professional Loan Repayment Program. And that means if you are a human service worker working in Illinois at a nonprofit that is partnering or contracting with the state, and I bet you're underpaid, you will, starting in a few months from now, have access to loan repayment help if you have an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, or a master's degree. And I just so believe that if we don't support the workforce, especially during this time of a labor shortage, and make sure humans are there to support other humans, everything across our human service realm is at risk of falling apart. And I saw in the news the other day that the city is moving forward and trying to transform how we do homeless shelters. And I'm in support of much of that, but they are struggling to open new beds because of the labor shortage. So this continues to be a priority of mine. We made some progress, but I'm going to continue to focus on it all year round and make some progress next spring.
Of course. Well, thank you, Representative LaPointe. And moving on, my second question is, were there any particular challenges or obstacles you faced while you worked to pass some of the bills you did this session? And we're going to start with Representative LaPointe on this one.
That's a great question. I mentioned that we did achieve level funding for mental health early action on campus to ensure that we can continue to send state dollars to our public universities and community colleges. That was not easy. And that's kind of shocking because it was already in the budget. But when the governor introduced his proposed budget in February, for whatever reason, he had cut the mental health early action on campus funding from about 13 million to 4 million. And it's all a process. This is why Rob and I are in Springfield for so much of the spring, to advocate and to get things to a better place in the budget. We were doing a press conference 2 days before the budget passed to do everything we could to hold the line with this funding. So that was a challenge. And I wish we could increase funding, but we had to settle for level funding this year.
Great. And Senator Marwick, if you had anything to add.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question, Christian?
I sure can. So the question is this: Were there any particular challenges or obstacles you faced while you worked to pass the bills you did this session?
Sure. I think that the bill that probably gave me the most in terms of heartburn was the implementation of the elected school board. Again, this is something that's been kind of near and dear to my heart, having worked on it back when everyone thought I was crazy and that it would never pass. So when the implementation bill came up, it's just sort of a natural process. I carried it when everybody laughed about it, thinking it would never happen. When it came to fruition, well, then not surprisingly, more people want to weigh in, and that's a good thing. That's what democracy is supposed to breed. But it was a lot of people who had never had an opinion suddenly had one, and of course, you have to deal with that. And so it was challenging seeing people who, wanted to reinvent the wheel when on something that had been worked on for nearly 8 years. But it was a difficult process. I tried to keep my cool and just sort of work my way through it, knowing that I had to explain something to, again, that people hadn't been paying attention to for very long. But it's really great because you see so many people that are engaging in it, and that's the whole purpose of it in the first place. So it was difficult managing my emotions and doing, feeling like I had to do work over again that I had done the first time around. But in the end, it worked out quite well.
Good. All right. Well, thank you to the both of you for your answers on that one. My third question is, can you talk about a bill that we have not yet mentioned that you supported but did not lead and that you were particularly excited about? And we'll begin with Senator Marwick.
Oh gosh, there were so many bills that passed, and the nature of what Lindsey talked about at the very beginning, where you've got literally over 5,000 bills filed, and roughly somewhere between 500 and 600 pass. And if you're lucky, as a legislator, maybe you pass 15. 20 bills. Some legislators don't pass any bills. Some are lucky to pass 3 or 4. I know Lindsey has always carried a pretty heavy bill load, as have I. But even then, there are so many good bills that passed through. And I was just even looking at the list today. There were bills that I did not lead on. And again, I'll take this opportunity to talk about what a pleasure it is to have such a collaborative process with Lindsey. It's funny, we're on different screens here on this Zoom, but literally there's a wall because our offices are right next to each other. We share the same office suite. And the great thing about citizen-led democracy is diversity. And diversity means so many different things, but in terms of our approach to legislating in the General Assembly, diversity in experience, right? I come from a criminal law and a tax law background, and Lindsey comes from a social work background. And the bills that she has sponsored that I've been able to join as in a supporting role, especially as it relates to mental health, have been really, I think, some of the things that I was most proud to support.
Great. Thank you, Senator Marwick. And Lindsey?
All right, I'm going to pick 2. I can't just pick one, and I'll do it fast. And these are different things we haven't touched on too much tonight. So one is related to our small businesses, which we have many on the far northwest side, and everyone wants to support them. But let's put our money where our mouths are. Let's do something in Springfield to truly support our small businesses. And if you flip to my priorities slide, this might be listed there, team. There's a bill pending in Springfield that did not end up in any sort of revenue package that would have provided tax credits to small businesses that have under 50 employees. And we know it's a struggle for our small businesses. Many of my good friends own small businesses right here on the far northwest side, and they work a bajillion hours a week. It is tough work, and we need our small businesses to thrive. And so I thought this was a really exceptional bill to provide some support through a tax credit to our small businesses. And it would have been a hit on our state budget. It's kind of hard to calculate, but this was a bill led by Representative Myers-Martin and Senator Bill Cunningham, and I look forward to helping them get it across the finish line into a revenue package in the future. Another bill I want to mention that I'm really excited is a weird word because it's the need for this bill is really tragic and heartbreaking, but Karina's bill that is listed here, it is named after a domestic violence victim from Little Village, but there's so many victims and survivors out there. And I do think we will get this bill across the finish line. It's pending right now in the General Assembly. And what this bill would do when somebody who has endured domestic violence files for an order of protection, right now, the alleged perpetrator, if there's an order of protection, has to give up their guns that they own. But there's no mechanism for law enforcement to actually go in and procure those guns. And so Karina's bill says that a judge would tell law enforcement, here is a warrant, you have to go in within 96 hours and take away those guns. If in domestic violence, there are times where the victims are at extreme risk to be killed, frankly. And this is a bill that we have to get across the finish line, and I'm very pleased to work alongside the sponsors to get it done.
Of course. Well, some very important policy on the horizon in Springfield, excuse me. Next up, what piece of legislation did not pass? Oh, excuse me. Is that the? No, okay. Sorry about that. What piece of legislation did not pass this year that you hope to continue to work on or see passed in the fall or next spring? And we'll start with Representative LaPointe.
Well, I'll add one more, and they're actually listed here as my priorities. Although I would count Karina's bill and the tax credit bill I just mentioned in this category too. So also related to public safety, the two bills listed at the bottom of this slide are both sponsored by Rep. Cam Buckner, who you might recognize because he ran for mayor in last election cycle. But these two bills are so critical to public safety and to true support for people that have survived crime. The Homicide Victims Families Rights Act would mandate police departments to reopen cold cases after 3 years and take a fresh look. The really tragic reality is that so many of our homicide cases in Illinois and nationwide, but in Chicago, our rates are particularly bad. Our homicide cases are not solved. And when you are a family that has to endure that tragedy and get no healing or justice and no perpetrator is even apprehended, that is so much pain to carry around. And so the idea with this bill is we want to push all our public safety stakeholders, including our law enforcement and detectives, to take another look and really see what else we can do to try to get justice for our families. The second bill here is very related. There's a statistic called shooting and homicide clearance rates. When somebody is shot or killed, are we figuring out who the perpetrator is? In many cases, we are not. And so this bill pushes our law enforcement agencies to provide more transparency in what the current numbers are in terms of to what extent are cases being cleared. And the whole point of this, at least to me, is that we know what we're dealing with and we are truly supporting survivors of crime.
Great. Thank you, Representative. Senator Marwick, if you had anything.
Well, as I mentioned, the stuff that I continue to work on when I give myself that incomplete, those are the three things. I think that, Illinois, we have made so much progress and we are on our way towards, we're really steering the ship in the right direction financially, but everything is based off of sort of short-term financial picture, balancing budgets in the moment, dealing with our finances in the moment. And for me, especially as the parent of two small kids, I want to make sure that Illinois continues to be a great state for the future. And that means really dealing with our structural problems. And that means ensuring that we have a way to not just make the annual payments to our pension problem, that there's a solution that is real so that our children don't have to deal with the same problems that we've been saddled with. Property tax reform is something that's long overdue in the state. And I think if it's done correctly, can not only provide meaningful tax relief by getting rid of inefficiencies, but also, provide that stability so that businesses want to invest and grow our tax base and reduce taxes for all the rest of us. And I am committed. I really do believe in a system where the federal tax laws allow the wealthiest people who make hundreds of millions, even billions of dollars a year to pay no income taxes whatsoever, to structure their earnings in such a way as to all be deferred income, to take loans out against their deferred income and get away without paying any taxes at all. I think it's just straight unpatriotic. And I think we need a system that acknowledges that the heaviest tax burden that anyone in the United States of America faces, unfortunately, is a middle income taxpayer in the state of Illinois. And if we are going to provide the services that people need to get ahead, we have to do it in such a way that acknowledges that the middle class needs some relief. And so I'm really committed to a plan that brings about that. And I think that's a longer lift, but I'll continue to work on those three things because they are, to me, our core priorities. And when we talk about all of the other things that we want to do, and I tell people this all the time, government solves problems by spending money. And because we have been inefficient in the way that we raise it and the debts that we've created, we don't have as much to spend as we would like. And we as taxpayers, and I say we because we are all taxpayers, our money is not, we don't get to use 100% of our money because we have to pay so much interest on the debt that we've accumulated. And so finding a way to pay that back responsibly will create not only the ability to spend all the money that we need on education we want to, and on healthcare and on human services and on mental health, but will allow us to actually reduce the taxes for future generations while providing those services. And so it's something I'm committed to doing.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Senator Marwick, and thank you, Senator Representative LaPointe. Some very well-informed and very well-spoken answers. So we've got about 15 minutes left, and so at this point, we'll move on to some audience questions. And keep in mind that you can submit your questions at any point as we're discussing the ones we have gotten. And our first question is from Michael Rivera, and he asks, Senator Marwick, will you vote yes on Senate Bill 2158 if it were to hit the floor? Last year, you mentioned that during the 2023 virtual town hall that you would. Do you currently share the same feeling? The issue of homelessness is an important one.
Yes, and thank you, Michael. Tough question on a very significant piece of legislation. So by way of background, what this bill does for everyone who's listening is it would change some of the reporting requirements for people who are required to report on a sexual offender registry. It would eliminate a weekly reporting and change that to, I can't remember if it's every 2 weeks or once a month. And it would reduce some of the restrictions for sex offenders and where they could live in relation to a school. Currently, the law would require that anyone in a sexual offender registry live 500 feet away from a school, where this would reduce that to 250. Now, I agree with you that the issue of homelessness is a very important issue, and certainly I know that I can certainly say that on behalf of Lindsey, that she believes that it's important. The work that she's done has been incredible on that, and I understand that there is a relationship here. I will say this, though, when this question was asked of me last year, and I committed, that commitment was based off representations from the advocates of this bill that law enforcement was in full support. Is this a good bill or is this a bad bill? Though that analysis is something that citizen legislators, we rely on experts to give us a full picture so we can make difficult decisions. However, as it would turn out, law enforcement is not in support of this legislation, despite that was how it was represented to me. So when it was brought to me as this would help our homeless situation by easing the restrictions where people could live, and law enforcement was in full support, that was not the case. Now, I am not committed to voting against this bill, but what I do need is to see this legislation get to a point where it is ripe for a vote so that the advocacy can be had on both sides. Right now, this bill has been filed and it has never been assigned to even a substantive committee where experts could come in and talk about the merits of the bill. As a result, I don't really have a complete picture of what this bill would do or not do. And at this point, all I can say is I'm uncommitted because I need to weigh out two very important interests. And one, of course, is ensuring that we have the tools to address a very, very difficult situation with homeless people and making sure that they have good places to be able to live. That is critically important. But at the same time, I have to be able to listen to what law enforcement has to say when it comes to ensuring that people who might be the victims of domestic violence or sexual abuse have the protections necessary so that they can continue to live in safety. And until that discussion can be made, I'm not willing to commit my vote one way or the other, but rather I will commit to listening to both sides and making the best decision possible. So that is my answer now.
Of course. Thank you, Senator Marwick. And Representative LaPointe, I know the question was posed to Senator Marwick, but if you have anything to add on Senate Bill 2158, we'd love to hear it.
Sure. This is an issue that I've been in conversations with even before I was a rep. And in terms of the legislative process, it's so important to know that bills change as they go through the process. And in fact, most bills change as they go through the process. So the spirit of this bill, I support as it's written now. I support it. What it's going to look like when it comes up in committee, we don't know for sure. I recently connected the representative from FOP Lodge 7, which is our Chicago Police Union, their liaison in Springfield, who happens to be from the Northwest Side, to the lead advocate on this bill, Michael, who I'm sure you know, Lori Jo Reynolds, to keep moving the ball forward. That's what we need to do, keep moving the ball forward. And law enforcement in itself is diverse. We might have portions of law enforcement, like the Illinois Chiefs of Police Association, support something that the Illinois Sheriff's Association doesn't. So I will be following, and I'm absolutely with the spirit of the bill and how it's written today, and look forward to what it looks like as it keeps moving through the process.
Of course. Thank you, Representative. All right, moving on. Our next question from the audience is this. Can we identify how the state pays for these bills, meaning how much in new tax bonds and efficiency? I'm most interested in if the state reduces its footprint as part of its cost savings. And we can begin with Representative LaPointe.
This is a really good question. And Dan, it actually reflects some of the discussions that we had in our internal House Democratic Caucus discussions leading up to our votes on the budget and the revenue package. And there was a diversity of opinions on this. And so I will do my best to share my perspective on your question. One of the big ways that we increased revenue to make sure we had a balanced budget and can pay for the investments that many of us believe in is some of the stuff Rob went over before. we raised revenue in new areas. I think the sports betting one is a great example, and I believe the revenue for that is in the ballpark of $200 million a year, and that is a relatively new industry. We legalized that type of sports betting in Illinois. FanDuel and DraftKings, you might recognize those companies, in 2019. And some of these companies are making millions and millions of dollars at a 15% tax rate, where other states are, New York's taxing at 51%. So that was a thoughtful revenue enhancement to do what we need to do in state government by asking an industry that is making millions of dollars to chip in more. And we don't want to destabilize the industry. Nobody wants to do that, because then the revenue will just go up in smoke. I think the re-renters tax is another really good example that's bringing in significant money. That is a relatively new industry. Well, I don't know about so new anymore, but wasn't really paying full taxes, Expedia and Priceline. And that is how many of us do business right now. So my point is, as various industries expand and either aren't really taxed or aren't taxed at a rate that really matches the revenue they're bringing in, that's where we want to look. The other thing I'll say about this, and if I'm really to answer your question, yes or no, did we reduce our footprint? Probably not, to be honest. But the cost of government, in large part because it's about people, it's about a workforce, has gone up, no doubt, because when we are using government dollars to pay for the community care workers or the DSPs, and we're also raising minimum wage, we have to make sure that our workforce and our police officers and our firefighters, for that matter, our Illinois State Police, are earning an adequate amount that is actually going to keep them in the job and keep our government stable. It's a tough question to answer, but that's my take on kind of why and how we raised the revenue that we did. And yes, our footprint is growing, but there's a reason for that.
Great. Thank you, Representative LaPointe. And Senator Marwick, if you have anything to add.
Well, I think Lindsey gave a great answer. I would just say that the most important thing that a government can do in any current year is to operate a truly balanced budget. And however that budget becomes balanced, if it's balanced, it's a good budget. No budget ever does what everyone wants it to do. I can assure you, Lindsey will probably agree with me too, there were many, many legislators from both sides of the aisle. In fact, I think our budget debate in the Senate was fascinating, because as my Republican colleagues took to debate the bill, they alternated between "you're spending too much money," and the next Republican speaker would get up and say, "You're not spending enough money on higher education." And the next speaker would say, "You're spending too much money." And the next speaker would say, "You're not spending enough money on people with developmental disabilities." Meaning that you bring 177 different legislators representing all four corners of the state together, and they all come with a different set of priorities, either from their own personal beliefs or the challenges that their communities face. And they want to see spending in those areas. They want to see tax credits that were mentioned. What are tax credits? Tax credits are, hey, we want to help you so you don't have to pay any taxes, right? And so however you get to that final package, if you can do it while it's balanced, no one will ever think a budget is perfect. But the best budget is one that hits the majority of your priorities, keeps your growth to at least reflect the needs of the community while not exceeding it, and balances the budget. And so I think we did that. And again, I think that was reflected in our 9th credit upgrade. So for me, again, I would say that the biggest thing that I take away is not so much what happens in the current year. While that's critically important in any given year, I always try to return the focus back to the long-term trajectory. And right now, I would say that our long-term trajectory looks as good as it's ever been. because we are being fiscally responsible, and we're on the right track, but we have more work to do.
Of course, thank you, Senator Marwick. And before we move on to the last question, I'd just like to say that we do understand that we have a few minutes left, and so I'll ask both of you to please be brief in your response to the final question, to respect everyone's time here. The last question is this. Do members of the general public have an opportunity to be involved in giving input before a bill is presented to the General Assembly? Is time allotted to have them be part of the review process, so to speak? Thank you.
Do I start with that?
Yes, you may, Senator Marwick.
Yes. Was that brief enough?
I do think so. You can, of course, say a little bit more.
A little bit of brevity. Yes. There are many ways, and both of our offices receive that. So people can call our offices. They can call our office in Springfield, call our office in the district. And when big bills are up, we often hear quite a bit. Emails, text messages, in person. People will come down to Springfield and weigh in. Advocacy groups will do this. There is a process for people to fill out what's called witness slips online. You can go on to Illinois General Assembly, ilga.gov, and you go on there, and if you see a bill or you're aware of a bill, you become aware of it, you can fill out an online witness slip to say, I support this or I oppose this bill. So there are many ways that constituents can do that, and part of these town halls is to encourage that. You can make a difference. And as I always tell people, everyone who reaches out to my office, the most important part of democracy, because we have a representative democracy, is making sure that we understand what your feelings are on that bill. It doesn't mean we're necessarily going to agree with you or we're going to vote the way that you would like us to. That's not what we do. That would not be possible for us to make everyone happy on every bill, because people have differences of opinions. But knowing your thoughts and your input on those bills helps us make an informed decision so we can do what's best for our community.
Thank you, Senator Marwick and Representative LaPointe.
All right, that was a great question. The answer is yes. And what I will add is, if you really want to partner with us and help craft a bill, we can do that all year round. We actually don't have to wait until the spring session. I love to be prepared. And so during the summer and fall is a great time to meet with us over Zoom or in person and talk about the issue you're interested in, and then we can work to craft bill language together. And then I will also just add, when we file a bill, that's like, it's not over. We don't just want to file a bill. If you're passionate about it, you want to help move the bill through the process. And I know that we're both happy to work with you on that. Or if it's an issue that for whatever reason we really don't agree with and it's not a fit with us, and this happens, we connect you to the rep or the senator where it is a better fit, and we'll make a warm introduction.
Of course, thank you, Representative LaPointe. And that being that, we have reached our time allotment. So I would like to again say thank you to everyone for attending the Zoom tonight, and thank you for all your questions. Before you do go, I would just like to share a little information with everyone about our two upcoming events this summer, our upcoming blood drive and our housing and services resource fair. Our blood drive is taking place this Friday, June 21st from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Copernicus Center. I cannot overstate the importance of donating blood, as Chicago's hospitals are severely lacking in blood for those who need it. Each blood donation can save up to 3 lives and can be used in a multitude of life-saving procedures. Additionally, each blood donor will receive a $10 gift card at the door and be entered to win a $5,000 raffle. Our second event on Thursday, July 11th, will be a housing and services resource fair at the Irish American Heritage Center. This event will offer residents the opportunity to access important resources all under one roof, including but not limited to city keys, social security income, and other public benefit support, including information about affordable housing assistance, job training opportunities, and more. Appointments are required to work with the City of Chicago City Keys team. However, all other services will be available to all throughout the duration of the fair. Please reach out to our offices to formally RSVP for the event. And so that's what will be coming up this summer that we'll be hosting. And once again, thank you for all the questions. And if you didn't get your questions answered, please email us directly at the emails on screen, or call us at the numbers, or stop by at the office here in Milwaukee. And once again, thank you for this time this evening. I hope you enjoyed our legislative town hall. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for coming, and thank you, Christian, for doing a great job moderating.
Of course, thank you.
Good night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Good night.